Welcome to the video. Today we're going to talk about an unclassified B-2 Spirit attack strategy from the US's base Diego Garcia going into Iran. What that whole flow would likely look like, what assets would be involved. And we're going to talk about the GBU-57, a bunker buster bomb that weighs 30,000 pounds. If that doesn't get you excited, I don't know how to help you. We'll also talk about Iran's air defenses, their IADs, their integrated air defense systems, and how those would try to counter the B-2, EA-18G Growlers, F-18s, F-16s, F-15Es, A-10s, the basic kitchen sink that would be thrown at Iran. What are they going to do to try to counter that? We'll dive into all that. I'm excited you're here. Here we go. So let's start with this satellite view of Diego Garcia showing the B-2s that are on the ramp there. The B-2s deployed there from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. The interesting thing is the B-2 is absolutely capable of flying combat missions from Whiteman and does it routinely. This thing can go 6,000 miles, and as we talked about before, the GBU-57 30,000 pound bomb, it can carry two of those. That's basically like carrying the weight of an F-15E, 60,000 pounds. So that's a fully gassed up, loaded down fighter jet that it's carrying internally in its base. And it can take off from Whiteman Air Force Base and go and target anything around the world. Now, the fact that it has 4 deployed to Diego Garcia puts it within 3,000 nautical miles of Iran, so half the distance. So it basically gives it more ability to loiter without aerial refueling. And it's interesting because why would this be necessary, right? If it could fly the combat missions from Whiteman, why do we need it in Diego Garcia? Well, it definitely gives the Trump administration more of a bargaining position. So ultimately, this is a bargaining position. This is deterrence that is going on with having the B-2s closer to Iran than Whiteman Air Force Base being at Diego Garcia just gives them more of the perception of being in the fight. So what Iran is going to do is they're likely going to try to preemptively strike the B-2s if something were to go down. So the US would need to counter that. Iran's going to put container ships as close as they can to Diego Garcia that will be disguised as merchant vessels. These containers inside them will have potentially S-300s. They would have Shahab missiles that have a 1,200 nautical mile range. They would try to schwack these B-2s and Diego Garcia prior to the B-2s getting airborne. Ideally, though, intelligence and other assets will alarm the B-2s and let them know that an attack is imminent, and then they'll get airborne. Once they're airborne, they're imminently more hard to target. So at the end of the day, B-2s, using their stealth capability that absorb radar, their ability to absorb radar lives in the skin of the aircraft. And the fact that a lot of the things that would normally protrude out of the aircraft are flush with the skin of the aircraft, like AOA detectors, airspeed indicators, those things usually protrude out of the aircraft. These are internal and have special technology that allows them to be flat. Therefore, the skin of the B-2 can actually absorb radar material, so they're way less susceptible to those S-300s, those Russian-made SAMs, and any other assets that are going to try to be targeting them. So getting the B-2s airborne as fast as possible when the US knows that an attack is imminent from these container ships is going to be of utmost importance. And Iran is likely going to target Diego Garcia with what's called cluster munitions, which could likely be added to their Shahab lineup, the Shahab 3, the Shahab 4, which have roughly a 1,200 nautical mile range. Likely the warhead would be updated to try to put cluster munitions on those to then take out the airfield at Diego Garcia, so the B-2s would have nowhere to take off from, even if they couldn't target the B-2s themselves. But the US is going to put up KC-135 Stratotankers, which will be hovering somewhere on the western side of the Persian Gulf, likely around Saudi Arabia in protected airspace. So the B-2s can get up and loiter for over 24 hours. These crews are going to have the ability to stay up for long periods of time. Flying combat missions from Whiteman, they're all going to be trained and ready to do those long missions. So just staying up and loitering isn't going to be a factor for the bomber crews. And the ability to refuel with the KC-135s is going to extend their legs, their range, their loiter capability, basically exponentially until the pilots just can't fly anymore and basically need to be scooped out of the cockpit. So getting the B-2s airborne is the first step of this plan and this strategy that the B-2s will use to schwack targets in Iran. But that doesn't mean that the B-2 is the only star of the show. So carrier strike groups in the Persian Gulf are going to be main characters as well. They're going to launch EA-18G Growlers, which are going to go up against the integrated air defense systems of Iran. Weapons officer in the back who is going to be targeting the SAMs, the S-300s that are going to likely be trying to reach out and touch the B-2s, F-16s, F-15Es that are going to be going in to take down the air defenses of Iran. The B-2s are likely not going to be seen by that S-300. However, the F-18s, the F-16s, the F-15Es will be painted likely by that Russian technology. So the EA-18Gs going out and executing is going to be of utmost importance. In addition to that, cyber attacks and other intelligence means to take down Iran's integrated air defense systems is going to be huge. You're going to want to take down as many of those as you possibly can, because the B-2s are going to need to get in to the airspace. They're going to be stand-in bombers. A stand-off bomber would be a bomber that launches a cruise missile from far away, like a B-52 might do, and then they're really not in harm's way. But the B-2s could potentially be in harm's way because they're going to be doing what's called a stand-in bomber. They're going to be in the theater. They're going to have their fangs through the floor looking down at these targets as they're getting ready to drop their GBU-57s. And now I want to talk about the targets that would actually be targeted by those GBU-57s. Iran basically has missile cities, and this is what's going to be targeted by the GBU-57. In these missile cities, they're going to have their Shahab lineup of weapons. They're potentially going to have their uranium refinement facilities and any other nuclear plants that they have that they want to keep from being detected. There's rumors that these things go down to over 1,600 feet deep in order to protect themselves from being detected. And also, if a bunker buster goes through, there's rumors that these bunker busters can only go down to about 200 feet. Who knows? Likely there's some other technology out there that's not talked about that can reach out and touch these missile cities. But Iran has F-4s, F-14s, so they keep a lot of their armament, a lot of their fighter jets in these missile cities. So this is something that the US is really going to want to focus in on and harness in on as these weapon cells are getting down to the nitty-gritty and targeting in these GBU-57s to the exact target they're going to go after. Likely command and control, potentially any type of nuclear weapons facilities. These might be early on targets, and then targets that are directing specific communications into the theater are likely going to be targeted as well. Ideally, you wouldn't need to target the F-14s and F-4s, and every fighter pilot out there is going to beg you, please do not target these with bunker busters. Please allow us to spear them with our AMRAAMs. I mean, every fighter pilot's going to be licking their chops. Every F-18 pilot in theater, every F-15E, F-15C, F-22, F-35 pilot launching from the west side of the Persian Gulf, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, other areas are going to have bases where US assets are going to just go up and be ready to take down those F-14s and those F-4s. This is likely going to be done at night, so targeting and seeing the B-2 bombers with eyeballs are likely not going to be an option. But let's say for some reason these targets needed to be taken out during the day for whatever the reason may be. Those B-2s are going to go in with the EA-18G Growlers, taking down the enemy air defenses, and then Iran is going to launch something. They're going to launch F-5s, F-14s, F-4s to try to go after these. And if for some reason they were able to spot a B-2 would be highly vulnerable to an F-14, an F-4, because at the end of the day, the B-2 really doesn't have an ability to maneuver. It's built to be very stealthy and not be seen. That's why a lot of times when B-2s fly during the day, you've got another aircraft on the wing, so it dirties up that radar signature so the enemy can't really pin down what a B-2 would look like on radar. So ideally, these B-2s are going to drop their GBU-57 bunker buster weapons. You got that 6-pack of B-52s, so you come in from different angles, all different areas, really have no idea where they're coming from. This could really do damage. You could take out a 20-story building underneath the earth, and maybe more than that. So you've got 6 of these coming in, you've got 12 of these missile cities being knocked down, and now the B-2s turn and run and get out of there as fast as they can. Now you're going to have F-35s coming in from Saudi Arabia, coming in from UAE, coming in from Bahrain and Qatar to basically delouse, which means take down any types of F-4s, F-14s, F-5s. They're going to be going after these B-2s. So those will be delousing. The F-35s will delouse. The F-22s will delouse. And then you're going to have in the Persian Gulf a lot of F-15Es, F-18s, F-16s, A-10s that are really focused in on taking down any fast boats, any submarines that are trying to basically give give a last-minute punch to any naval assets as those B-2s make their way out of there. So making sure they get home safe is the #1 priority, and then you could refuel them and take them all the way back to Whiteman, or you just take them back to Diego Garcia, and you make sure that you're protecting them from any of those Shahab missiles, which might be loaded on merchant vessels that are disguising themselves as innocent civilian vessels. You got to make sure you take those down. So having a 4-ship, maybe an 8-ship of F-15Es over Diego Garcia to just keep a buffer zone around the area to keep any ships from coming in. An unlucky ship comes in, you fly over the bow, you tell it if it doesn't turn around, it's an act of war, and you take it down if you have to. At the end of the day, you really have to have every basis covered because Iran is going to use deception. And again, if we could just please not take out those F-4s and F-14s prior to them launching from their missile cities, allow them to get airborne, allow US fighter pilots to paint some stars on their jet. That's what you would paint on a jet if you have an air-to-air kill. That's going to be every fighter pilot's dream, so let's try to keep that alive if we can, if the targeting cell is watching these videos. But at the end of the day, the targeting cell is going to be really minutely getting down to the last inch of what they need to penetrate. They're going to be using classified software to understand what the terrain is going to be like. And dropping a weapon in mountainous terrain means you have to understand everything about that drop. You have to understand the impact angle, the velocity. So getting the B-2s to the correct altitude of how fast you need this thing to be going when it hits to penetrate down 200 feet or whatever the feet is that they need to penetrate into. And then in these GBU-57, there's actually delayed fusing that tells it exactly when the fuse needs to arm and it needs to go off. And that gives you the best blast, gives you the best ability to target anything that may be hidden underneath concrete, steel, earth, combination of all three. The weapon cells that really get down to the nitty-gritty on this are impressive, and they're going to be working overtime, likely they already are, to make sure they have weapon solutions and packets that could be zapped, basically text message to B-2 crews as they're airborne, as they're waiting over areas of Saudi Arabia, or they haven't even taken off from Diego Garcia. They could get these weapons packets basically handed to them as they walk out to the B-2s, and they won't actually know what they're going up against until they get in the B-2, they get airborne, they get all their systems ready, boom, they crack open the weapons packet. Now they know what they're going up against. But that is basically the sixth man of the basketball team, are the weapons planners who are making sure that they know exactly what's going to be targeted with that GBU-57. They should basically call that thing the Moab. I'm not sure why they call the Moab, but at the end of the day, the GBU-57 is the formidable bomb that will likely be used in a situation like this. Guarantee you there's multiple of these GBU-57s sitting on the ramp right now inside of B-2s. So here we are, we're at a position where the US has a lot of bargaining chips, but at the end of the day, Iran will not go down easy. So this is a situation where we all need to understand, hopefully prevent any hostilities from happening. What do you think? What do you think the strategy is that the B-2s will use to go in and take down any type of IADs, any type of targets in Iran? Or how do we prevent it? At the end of the day, I think it's all about deterrence and preventing a large-scale operation. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you would, subscribe to the channel. It would really mean a lot to me. There is basically 20% of you that are subscribed to the channel with the millions of views. So if I could get more, let's say we could get to 60, 70% of you all subscribed to the channel, we'd have over 1 million subscribers, and it would just help me do these videos basically every day. So I would greatly appreciate that. I love bringing you this content and information. Thank you so much for watching it, for sharing it, for smashing that subscribe button, for dominating the like button. All the things that you've done over the years to help me grow the channel, I greatly appreciate you. Come on back for another video. Those will pop up over here. So check that out after this is done. I've got stuff on the F-47, the Navy version of the F-47. I've got the EA-18G Growler, how that's taken hell to the Houthis. Really doing some good work right now. And then I've got how Iran would attack the US. So kind of the opposite of this video. That should pop up over here somewhere as well. So check that out. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next video. Most of all, have a great day.